It is awesome to know that so many people are turning into spirituality, but it is not merely enough spoken about the topic how spirituality and spiritual bypassing specifically can damage people, and not only the practitioners of spirituality, but those involved as well. And lately I had a doubtful pleasure of experiencing this in the first-hand scenario in my own life when I encountered someone who was so in denial. I am very much of a proponent of a balanced life. We were giving this physical body for a reason. And people that get into spirituality are getting into spirituality for the wrong reasons. And that doesn't include the fact why we were given the body. It is not talked about enough. Many spiritual teachers and leaders come from experience when they know a lot of things, but they don't share them. They share only the spiritual part. But because we were given this physical body, we have to master our experience, and I will tell you exactly why it's happening. Like I mentioned, many people who go into spirituality go into it because they're desperate with whatever means they had. They are oftentimes seeking an escape from the physical world. And this is such a wrong motivation to become spiritual. Spirituality is just really something natural to us when we come closer to living in our bodies. So it cannot be when we bypass the whole physical experience, the whole living in material realm, and just try to imagine that by praying, that by imagining some healing figures, by imagining angels, by imagining all the dimensions that we can get closer to, by carrying this spiritual ego. And we believe that by doing this, we can get into this imaginary land. But the truth is, you can only get there by a progression and by growth. Growth happens by evolution, and evolution requires resistance. Resistance is a natural thing that happens when we have the material world involved. The idea of material realm is what causes the resistance, the solidity of material world and struggle against different ideas, going into the world and having difficult relationships, going into the world and having to make a living, going into the world and maybe having some physical pain is required for growth and evolution. Spiritual evolution. I speak all about in my channel how pain is what is required to bring us closer to home. When I mean home, I mean getting closer to God. We were separated from the idea, from the sense of unity when we became children, and we had to be taken care of by mostly parents who didn't have unconditional love. So we had to go through our life through surviving. So that separation from unity, separation from God, is also serving a purpose, so that when we go through our life interacting with physical people, interacting with the physical world, we get into some sort of clashes where we experience pain. And we develop certain coping mechanisms such as people-pleasing, such as perfectionism, such as becoming inauthentic to ourselves, so that we manipulate the reality, the physical reality, in some sort of way that we become accepted by others, because we have to be accepted by our parents. But the thing is, we have to learn from these experiences, and we have to learn from pain. Pain is the only thing that brings us closer to God. And this is part of the physical realm that we can always take and correct by our free will. when we take new choices all the time. We need to develop our awareness, which is super, super important, into noticing where our old stories, where our old mind frames were limiting to us, when our old behaviors were coming from a state of fear, from the source of fear. And this is part of the physical realm. We have to have these difficult experiences to teach us where we have these stories, where we have those beliefs that we are no longer belonging to God, that we are no longer belonging to Source, that we are disconnected permanently, and that we are on our own, doomed and limited by only our coping mechanisms in order to survive. This is super important to know, because I want to get back to spiritual bypassing and spirituality and how that is often practiced. I will bring back the story that I have experienced very lately in my own life. The story I'm about to tell you took place about a couple of weeks ago where I live, and it goes like that. So a person that I thought I knew enough, I thought I had enough interactions with her, wanted to visit me here where I live. And I only accepted this because I thought our, so let's call it friendship, was enough for me to share my space with her. And the funny thing is, I did have a hunch about this. I did have a lot of hunches about this. And the most important hunch was the word that was coming through my mind over and over before she came to visit me was that I will learn something. The word learning was pushing itself forth into my consciousness over and over and over. And I thought I was going to learn something else, but I learned so much more. Anyway, she came to visit me, and she's what she considered herself a highly spiritual person. She's also a coach, and I thought we might have had something in common. And boy, I was wrong. That's usually how it goes, especially during the solar eclipse that we had during this time. Anyway, very quickly, in the matter of a couple of days, it became very clear to me that this person was extremely entitled and that she was extremely immature. The thing is that she demanded things to revolve around her, and when they didn't, and I was blocking my energy from giving any sort of pleasing behaviors to her, she became very frustrated. Like I say, this person turned out to be superior and very self-righteous about her spirituality, and this denial about her humane, imperfect nature was really the stumbling block in us getting closer. Anyway, she became very frustrated with me not pleasing her, with me not wanting to accommodate her demanding wishes, her entitled childish behavior, and then even more, she started playing victim in that situation. She started accusing me of hurting her feelings. And the story went on for another 2 or 3 days, during which time I still felt there was something for me to understand from this situation, where I was withholding my energy from not overgiving and from not explaining myself. She became gradually more frustrated with this dynamic. It was clear, obviously, that I would have learned that this relationship was not for me, but there was a deeper learning about what I was going to learn about myself and about the grander picture of how things are happening. So the thing is about denial in spirituality, denial, which is called spiritual bypassing, it happens when people are so self-righteous about their idea of spirituality, about what they think how the world should be organized around them. They are missing the important aspect of life, that they were born human. And the evolution goes from the physical to spiritual. People who join the spiritual ranks, they want to be right there already. And there is no evolution happening without dealing with the fullness of humanity, with the imperfection of you yourself as a human. And I've learned this long time ago when I became sick. And pain from becoming sick is the lowest realm of dealing with physical experience. This is when the real pain is so all-consuming that there is nothing more than pain in your life, that there is nothing more that you're facing, literally your death right in front of you. And dealing with that is the most spiritually elevating experience you can have. That's why people who encounter close death experiences, that they become very spiritual, because they see the meaning behind pain. They see the meaning behind the physical experience. Through pain, through dealing with the physical, they are brought closer to home, to unity. But it has to happen when you live your life without having close to death experience. It has to happen from the point of your awareness. It has to happen from the point of your acceptance. There is no healing, there is no evolution without accepting the prior step of evolution. The way I used to teach women in my Mind, Body, Soul healing program, where they were able to heal their chronic disease through the power of going inwards, was that the first point to all transcendence, meaning going to the next step, is acceptance. You cannot go higher without accepting the lower. And that's why, many people have these confused ideas about spirituality versus depth psychology, and they think these ideas are so separate, but they are all connected. They just live on a spectrum. Many people that go into the so-called New Age ideals, they forget that we have to first face all the ugly and dirty and imperfect parts of being a human before we can see the face of God. And we can see the face of God, we can see the unity, we can experience the unity when we become closer to ourselves in those darkest moments of our life, when we can see our imperfection and our humanity in our nakedness, our shame, when we can experience the pain of abandonment, when we can experience our trauma fully and hold ourselves in deep compassionate embrace. This is when we can experience the unity. This is when we have a glimpse of God, because we become that unity that holds us bigger, holds our lower selves, holds our pain through something bigger, because we become bigger when we do that. And like I started saying, many people who are becoming spiritual from that point of view of New Age spirituality, I don't have better words of calling this, these people are so readily in denial about different aspects of their humanity that they're actually making it impossible to themselves to grow higher. They simply tag along a certain movement. They repeat a certain dogma. And dogma in itself is the problem. What brings us closer to God, what brings us closer to enlightenment, what brings us closer to unity of experience and to have unconditional love to another human being or everyone else, to animals and to all the planet, is not through repeating mantras, is not through listening to a lot of guided meditations, is not through considering ourselves very spiritual and surrounding ourselves with a lot of crystals. It's not that. It's actually through going through those painful moments, accepting ourselves, knowing that we are perfectly imperfect, that we can be inside our body, that we can struggle in our life and still have that compassion to hold ourselves so dearly, so lovingly, that this moment transcends pain. This is exactly the most healing thing that transcends us from the physical realm, because we know in this moment that we are connected to something bigger. It is happening through our self-discovery and self-exploration, where we see those imperfect parts, when we can see how flawed we can be, and at the same time how these flaws are nothing else but curriculum to work through. They only point to us what is real for us, how we can work through the coping mechanisms we developed, and denial, and trying to use this as to catapult ourselves to enlightenment. It can never work. It's just a repression. It's just a repression. It's a very paradoxical concept where people who bypass spirituality, they're bound to feel victimized, because when you bypass, you haven't claimed your full power that stems from embracing yourself fully, from looking into your shadows, and from accepting these shadows and knowing how to work through and with them, how to turn them into gold. This is the real source of power. When you live in denial, you only see that superior point is just a mask that you're wearing, and this is the mask that you're staring at in the mirror, and you believe that's all there is. And because everyone from the outside is not working like puppets to keep and maintain that image that you have, you're bound to feel victimized. You're bound to feel like everyone else is unfair. And this is a very childish, immature way of looking at world. And it has nothing to do with an evolved spiritual consciousness that happens when you embrace, when you struggle with yourself, when you look at your demons, when you work through them, when you love yourself deeply and you grow higher. This is the only way you can transcend yourself, when you transcend those lowest parts. And when you think you've grown consciousness, you will get another lesson that will prove to you that there is more to evolve. And this is how the life process goes. But for this, we need to accept that we were born physical, that we were born to have experiences of contrast, that we are bound to experience resistance from life. That really is what polishes us into diamond. That really is what polishes us into this spiritual being that we are in essence. But our consciousness needs to catch up and learn all these lessons in order to fully comprehend and align with this. I speak a lot in my channel about how we can use our emotions, because emotions are the bridge to our enlightenment. They are the bridge to aligning with our source energy. And by doing this, whenever we feel pain, whether that's physical pain that you can feel in your leg or wherever, or pain that we also feel physically by dealing with maybe relational problems or having difficult workplace scenario going on, or whatever things are happening, when we are experiencing pain and we use emotions, the knowledge of emotions, and work through that subject, this is what aligns us, which is what collapses our physical world with our source energy. And we have to do it over and over and over and over, because we keep experiencing pain. And whenever pain happens, this is our chance to align and transcend, to align and transcend. At the foundation of real spirituality and higher consciousness, there is responsibility. Taking responsibility for your thoughts, for your actions, for your choices, and for creating everything in your life. No one has the right to ask you to make them feel better. And you have no right to ask for others to make you feel better either. No one has the responsibility or obligation to do anything for you that they don't want to do. And trying to use any sort of mask, whether that's spirituality, people pleasing, being perfectionistic, or overworking, whatever you want to call it, whatever coping mechanism or ego mask you're putting on, to try and coerce others and manipulate them to do things you want them to do, is nothing different than being a bully. Because these are all just masks that we put on to try to get what we want. I know these things can be very painful to some of us, but this is true. And the fastest we learn this, the fastest we see our flaws in using the wrong methods, using the wrong techniques in order to get what we need, feel better, enrich our life, the sooner we can live in the life that we want to see. And we won't have to do it through manipulating, controlling, and coercing others. That usually comes from the inner idea of helplessness. Because only denying to yourself the power you have of creating the world from within is what causes us to reach and resort to those coping mechanisms, to those masks, to even putting on a mask of a spiritual person that is as superficial as any mask gets. You can only attain higher level of consciousness and therefore consider yourself spiritual when you've grown enough of self-awareness to base your consciousness on. And this comes from developing a lot of self-awareness, and this comes from getting self-acquainted with what's going on in your body, with being able to recognize how do you react to yourself, to your thoughts, to your own behaviors. How do you correct yourself through the conscious choices? I speak all about choices, but it all happens through responding to life. It doesn't happen by bypassing life and pretending that life and reality isn't here. Even, when you consider meditation, the biggest point in meditation is transcending the masks that we are putting on, is transcending the inauthenticity when we think we have to control everything on the outside, when we think we have to make ourselves different, we make ourselves maybe superior, or make ourselves inferior, or make ourselves be seen in all those different ways, so that we control the reality. But in meditation, what happens, we dissolve these masks. We get closer to our physical body, and we can actually become more in tune with what's going on when we drop off these different thought patterns, those different stories about ourselves and others. And you stand naked, so to speak, in front of yourself when you experience a fullness of your being over time when you've done meditation. And that's why, you know, it is all about embodying. It is not about escaping the body. It's all about becoming so close to yourself. Therefore, you're accepting by acknowledging, and therefore you can transcend. Therefore you can get higher. Therefore you can learn more about who you are, what it all is, where you connected, you grow. What is very interesting is, over a period of time of growing and internal evolution, you might actually have this almost physical sense as if you've grown. And this is funny thing I've started experiencing maybe a year ago or so, that, you know, I'm not a very tall person, but all of a sudden everything started feeling like it's smaller, like I've grown in size. And it was just very funny thing to experience, but I know where it comes from. It comes from like literally growing consciousness. And, you know, if I measured everything around me, it would be probably relatively the same to how I used to be. But it's not about the physical dimension to measure, it's about the level of consciousness and what you can perceive, from what levels you can perceive things to be. Yet I don't consider myself perfect in any sense of that word. But I have become more perfect in accepting my imperfections, in seeing my weaknesses as human, and dealing with life, being with flow with what life brings, and yet using my free will, using my choices, using my intention, my energy, my thoughts to shape and create a reality from inside, not by trying to control things and manipulate. But my thoughts are changing, my perceptions are changing, my behaviors are changing, my stories are changing. And what I do, I constantly work. Maybe someone could say I'm overworking this sometimes, but this is, I'm just so curious. I really want to experiment in life and see how my small tweaks in thoughts, in energy, what kind of impact they have. And dealing with physical realm, dealing with physical obstacles, dealing with physical imperfections of ourselves, others, and the functioning of the world without being limited by that is what offers us sometimes those huge insights. Because mind you, I want to encourage you to remember when you've changed the most, when you've grown the most, when you've changed your consciousness and elevated your state of being the highest, that you were able to see from a higher perspective. Wasn't that after you experienced something hard? Wasn't that after you were challenged really badly by something or someone? Wasn't some difficult situation that made you see things in a different way that you had not been able to see before that difficulty has happened? That's why this struggle, this push, it makes us grow. It's like us applying ourselves versus the world is what gives us the chance to develop new higher ways, to develop new ways of seeing, to change our perception, to change our thoughts, always happening choice by choice. We have to be self-aware and we have to be choosing over and over. We make thousands of choices a day that compound to the life we live, that make the life that we have, that make the relationship, that make us. That thought that you're thinking right now is something you can choose to change. That belief, that story that you keep repeating to yourself is something you can change. This over time is what brings you to enlightenment, that brings you closer to God. This is step by step, constant, consistent evolution, choice by choice, choosing the next thought, choosing the next thought, choosing the next action, choosing the next belief, choosing the next whatever relationship. So I've created a free guide that you can use for this reason. It's so simple, but it has helped me to heal my life in so many different ways, and I'm still referring to this process that I've created over and over and over, and it helps me grow higher. It helps me transcend any sort of situations like the one that happened to me. It helps me see things clearly whenever there's uncertainty and chaos. So feel free to download this. It's completely free from the link below. This is what evolution is about. It's not about, oh, I'm gonna pretend I'm already in the 5th, 7th, or whichever dimension I am, because I imagine this in my mind and I want everyone to behave in that way, and I want everyone to please me so that I can experience those elevated emotions when they please me. So really bypassing is detrimental for you and for everyone that is involved in your environment. So I hope this video has been informative. I will post a couple of videos that explain this process, how you use the emotions, that you use this bridge to align yourself closer, and the most important, how you can look into your deep shadows. And I'm thinking about a few topics that I will also post in the description here. For now, thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next video.